As you can see right behind me, it is a residential neighborhood that is adjacent right next to this Southport Levee trailhead park that we have. So there's a trail here, and then there's a park that was just recently built right here. And when this was built, this parking lot and this whole entire trail, you would probably imagine that the folks in this residential area right here were probably not very thrilled. And you're probably asking yourself, well, what does this have to do with a Kendrick Lamar video? Well, as a matter of fact, it has a lot to do with it because recently his mural down in Compton was desecrated by a group of what is allegedly a Mexican gang known as the Tortilla Flats, which is not to make pun of the entire situation of a Mexican food and comparing it to a Mexican gang, but that is the name of their neighborhood, sometimes often named after the streets that they live in, such as Grape Street or Piru. In this particular case, Kendrick Lamar grew up with Pirus, and as you know, Los Angeles used to be a very high African-American population, and as years went on, it started declining, and then in came the rise of Mexicans and Latinos and the controversial issue that we have today with illegal immigrants. So it is the classic story of the people that used to live here versus the people that don't anymore, and then people moving in as a result, creating conflict. Nothing different from what you've seen in Palestine and all these other conflicts that are going on around the world. In fact, a lot of them have very much similar traits. Now, a lot of people in the past, during the comment sections, I've read something to the effect of, let's say if I was to talk about lefty gunplay or Tupac issues or whatever issues that are going on in LA in terms of gang culture, they often comment saying something to the effect of, well, you know what, maybe you should not talk about gang politics. And you know what's crazy about that is that a lot of you really have no idea who I am. And I'll just put this in perspective like this. When I first moved to California, the first city that I had lived in was in Stockton. Obviously, I had, let's say, a known family member that I had lived with during that time. And in that surrounding area, guess what? It was nothing but Samoans and Asians. Let's just put it like this. I know a lot of people in the Asian Boy Crips and all the people that are in Stockton and all the people that are affiliated with that particular section. Okay, so for you to say that I don't know anything about this particular world, well, put it like this. Now living in Sacramento and been a long-time resident here, there's a lot of dudes that are about that life in Sacramento that know who I am. The question is, and I don't need to answer this to you, you got to ask yourself, how is it that they know a person like me, a person who's highly educated, a person who speaks proper, or as a square, as you like to call it? Well, the reality is the reality, and the facts are the facts. I know what I'm talking about, so here we go. Let's talk about Kendrick Lamar and his mural being desecrated in Compton. So as you guys know, speaking of the gang politics of things, this is beyond gang politics, but also a racial issue that, quite frankly, is sometimes very underestimated. I'll give you an example. Tupac said in the To Live and Die in LA song, where would LA be without Mexicans, right? And I gotta be honest with you, he's right, but it depends on what hood or what politics or what neighborhood is surrounded by a particular section in terms of their relations with certain gangs and whatnot. In this case, unfortunately, it's not about black love, brown pride, and the sets again type of situation. We're talking about the Pirus, a neighborhood that Kendrick Lamar was affiliated with, or still is affiliated with, and the ongoing war that they've had with Mexicans in that region, on top of the fact that, quite frankly, Compton is becoming a lot more brown than black if you've been paying attention to the trends of its demographics. So it's really not difficult to understand why a group of these guys would go and spray paint Kendrick Lamar's mural, knowing that he is a legend in the West Coast, if not the entire black community around the world. But the problem is, a lot of people are taking this into a racial matter. That's the unfortunate part about it. There is a racial component to this because they want to attach it to the idea that it was racially motivated. Now, is it racially motivated? In my humble opinion, I'm going to tell you right now, it's not. I just think that there's indicators of that. There's indicators of that. A lot of Mexican gangs that don't like black gangs in LA, I gotta tell you, their main prerogative is race, right? In other words, let's say if they were to write NK, which is what? I'm not even gonna repeat to you what the N means, but obviously the K in the end in most gang insignias is killer, as in killing the opposition of the name in the person in front of it that you are trying to proclaim or go against. So they didn't do that. They wrote something else though. They wrote PK, which stands for Pyru Killer or Unaliver, as the new age and the new generation likes to say. So intelligently looking at it, you have to ask yourself, did they do this out of race or was it done out of gang politics? And I think you know the answer to that, because if they were to write NK, then it's obvious what they mean. But if they were to write PK in the proclamation that they have made in the first place, then you understand exactly what their intentions were. That's all that I have for this one. Don't forget to like and subscribe as we check out the view right around you right now. And by the way, before I head out, let's talk about a few subjects in terms of this weekend's fights, right? Want to make a few predictions on certain fights. Well, actually, one fight in particular, because I think this fight deserves a prediction all of its own and its own attention. And by the way, who better than Brian Ortega to represent this particular video that has a Los Angeles component to it? Because obviously that's the interest of story that we're talking about. So Diego Lopes taking on Brian Ortega. Let's talk about Brian Ortega for a second before we get into the prediction. Brian Ortega, in my humble opinion, is going to win this fight because I think that he is the much more technical fighter. He is the much more proficient grappler, being a Gracie Jiu-Jitsu black belt. And on top of that, I think Diego Lopes is too reckless. And why is he reckless? Well, because he's a crash test dummy. That's really the best way to put it. What about Brian Ortega? Is he one? I think not. And you know what? This sort of goes and gives a sociological explanation that ties into the meaning and the beginning of the video that we are talking on right now, which is Kendrick Lamar and the type of life that you have to lead when you are growing up in Compton or in LA, at least in Brian's case in East LA and things of that nature. You got to grow up witty. You got to grow up smart. You have to grow up knowing how to be methodical. And I think that living those type of life really lends itself to having technical awareness in your fights, which means that Diego Lopes in this fight, he's going to be a crash test dummy. He's going to swing for the fences. And as a result, Brian Ortega is going to counter with wrestling. And not only is he going to counter with wrestling, he's also going to counter with transitions on the ground. If, let's say, Diego Lopes was to somehow get him on the ground or be in top positions that Brian Ortega would have never expected. But either way, I'm going with Brian Ortega by decision all 3 rounds, and that is my final prediction on that. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I hope that you liked the breakdown that I did with the Kendrick Lamar situation, while also tying it to another Los Angeles native, which is Brian Ortega, and how well he's going to do in his fight against Diego Lopes this weekend. And I'm not just saying that out of biasness, because obviously it's a Los Angeles themed video, but it's the reality of the situation. And I hope that I broke it down for you in the most entertaining ways possible. Don't forget to like and subscribe.